right, I think we're live here. Let's let me make sure I'm doing this right here. All right, y'all, back, ready to go here. Let me know if you guys can hear me, if the audio is good, and we'll get started on this National Signing Day, early Signing Day Eve, what has really, for all intents and purposes, become National Signing Day. Awesome. All right, so there's not a whole lot of structure to this. I'll just give you guys an idea as to kind of where I think Florida State stands with kids. If you have particular questions that you want to go over, individual recruitments, whatever else, I'm happy to go over that. Kamari Wilson is the first question. Yeah, I wouldn't anticipate Kamari signing with Florida State, and happy to see him go to Georgia, to be honest with you. And if you're a place like Georgia, that's kind of got to be the type of spot that you sign a kid like that, to where you have enough infrastructure and everything to keep somebody like that, have enough competition around him to where he can stay focused and, make him the best player that he could possibly be. So, we already got the, let's see, we've gotten some Travis Hunter questions. Of course, we will. Kamari Wilson, best of luck to him in Athens, by all accounts. Nigel Kelly is somebody that I'm probably going to be slightly more optimistic than most others. I'm not going to say that you are signing this kid per se, but you have had some decent feedback from his end of the equation. Now, do I question, is every other school recruiting him getting similar feedback? Very possibly. But that's one that I would keep an eye on a little bit more than what, the general consensus is around following kids' recruitments here that were on the edge of National Signing Day. Kesna, Marvin Jones Jr., I think if you're a Florida State fan, you just got to hope that that kid goes to sleep tonight and has dreams about, the contributions that his dad made and his uncle and his cousin and everything else, and just hope that he wakes up with the real strong desire to, carry on kind of the family tradition of playing ball at Florida State. I think you've done everything in the world recruiting this kid. You knew it would be a challenge. You knew it would probably go down to the edge, to the end, if nothing else, just out of respect for the school and all the family ties that exist there. But I think you're probably sitting behind Bama and probably Georgia, and maybe even USC, strangely enough. Yeah, Julian Armella, I think you can all but count him in the class for this, at this point in time. It would take something wild for you to not be there. The NIL opportunities with Jones Jr. are certainly something that Florida State had in their corner. But, everybody out there is gonna be throwing things at these kids, and certainly Florida State's not the only person or the only group that could put together a competitive NIL for somebody like that. Okay, so FSU with and where they are with Coleman, I think there's a little bit more of some slight, last minute optimism on that end with Coleman right now. I still think he's going to sign elsewhere, but it does sound as though Florida State is maybe slightly more confident at this point in time than they were maybe a day ago. But again, I think this kid goes elsewhere. And, the wide receiver recruiting in general is something that will have to be evaluated and really kind of taken stock in, like, how this played out, and to the extent that, Florida State still has not turned over a room that desperately needs to be turned over. And, I don't know the exact circumstance with Mortimer. It certainly sounds like, there's some issues that both sides need to get cleaned up there. I still think the kid's going to sign with Florida State, but I think there was an understanding that there might be a visit that takes place there, and I don't know. It's just an issue of communication, and ultimately, I think the kid signs with Florida State. Florida State desperately needs to sign him at this point, and hopefully you're evaluating this wide receiver conundrum after adding Mortimer and the the off-referenced Dustin Hill, who I think ultimately joins the class here, or joins Florida State in January. It has been a long, strange trip, certainly to I don't know. The Dustin Hill situation's a wild one, but I think you ultimately do get him on campus here, and hopefully you can get him into the pipeline, get him developed, and this just becomes some strange recruiting saga that is referenced for the next decade or so. Why do I not have? Yes, those are Christmas lights. Why do I not have them turned on? They're too bright. Honestly, when I plug them in, they just don't work on video. So it's kind of a strange look to have and not have them plugged in, but that's the case. Helton coming back is a little bit surprising to me. He was one of the guys I thought would make their way out and seek other opportunities, so to say. Yeah, I mean, Dugans is something that will have to be reviewed. That's all you can really say at this point. Hopefully he has decent amount of success tomorrow, add some kids, and that conversation is one that's a little less awkward. But until that takes place, I think there's going to be a decent amount of skepticism as to the recruiting that Ron has done, or unfortunately was not able to do. So Coach Dillingham, as Colin puts it there, yeah, I mean, I think Kenny ultimately is going to make his way out to the West Coast. I just think there's a general understanding here that doesn't need to take place in the next 24 hours. There's not a whole lot to gain from Oregon's perspective if you announce Kenny Dillingham right now. I think it's a convenient situation for everybody to kind of see this part of the process through, and then Kenny can go out west and start his own, be the captain of the ship on his own side of the ball, and wish him the best of luck out there. I do think, yes, Kamari Wilson is trolling us. One of the first things that I mentioned, at least he is in my opinion. Is Florida State more likely to finish with a top 15 class or a class outside the top 15? Yeah, Derek, I don't see how they fall out of the top 15. I mean, in all likelihood, you're going to add some really nice kids tomorrow, and some really nice kids tomorrow that maybe even have higher recruiting rankings than necessarily where I would have. I mean, look, and that's Armella's a great pickup. He's just not the number one, number two offensive tackle in the country, right? Same thing with West. Is that a 5-star defensive tackle according to some services? Yes. According to most people, no. No, he's not. He's a great pickup. And if you sign West, let me just pick this up to make sure I'm not, not doing this wrong. If you sign West, I believe you'll sign 3 of the top 11 players in the state of Georgia, which is kind of what you need to do if you're Florida State. You're never going to, dominate that that state by any means, but you need to be a player and a kind of a consistent presence in the state, and that would be a massive pickup. Tyler, let's see, what did you say? A lot of issues right now. Yeah, Tyler, I mean, I think you bring up some good points there. I think that running back recruiting, you've got a decent recruiter there. You've certainly got a guy with relationships, so he gets credited or associated with some recruitments, and he's done a good job bringing some kids to the program with his ties to the state of Louisiana. But, and on the offensive side of the ball, you got Kenny Dillingham, who's leaving, and you've got Alex Atkins, really good recruiter, and you've got Mike Norvell. I mean, those are your offensive recruiters right now. That's a challenge. I will say this, that like Mike Norvell is probably trying to handle as many recruitments individually as I think a head coach can possibly do. That's reflective, in my opinions, that as a head coach, when you get done with this, you need to sit back and be like, yeah, I need to be able to rely on more people than, myself or two or three people to really see some of these commitments or some of this recruitment through. Phil, glad you're able to step out of the Christmas party and really appreciate you joining us tonight. How long till Florida State gets back to dominating the ACC in the same way that the great Glasgow Ranger? Yeah. I mean, you certainly have to like what you've seen over the last couple months as far as Clemson having to deal with changes for the first time in a long time. And could you see Florida State being in a place to, really compete for the conference within 3 years? Yeah, I think so. I still think they have to do a better job of, they've got to do a better job of kind of what I just said, but also not just in individual position coaches, but really the broader program, the broader athletic department. I mean, Florida State has to do a better job of some of the surrounding pieces to really be seen as a, fully invested athletic department, particularly fully invested towards football. And I'm not, fully invested has its own connotation, but it's not just NIL or, bags of non-taxable money. It's about having people in positions that are absolute professionals and ready to do everything that's necessary to be, competent additions to an athletic office in a football program. Let's see. Are there any big surprises on the radar? This is a common question out there. And I'm going to give you an answer that I feel slightly more confident because I'm not trying to sell you anything. And I'm not trying to sell you, a last-minute sub at midnight or something like that and try to get you to sign on to a message board because of a mystery recruit, said with fingers in the air. Yeah, I do think there's one name out there, guys. And I don't try to be this guy, but there is one prospect out there that I think Florida State has a chance to sign in tomorrow that would be a pretty big surprise to a lot of people, and would be a welcome addition to the class. So I can't go into a whole lot of names like that, but there are a couple prospects out there, one in particular that if Florida State signs, it would be a big deal, and it would be seen as a, something that comes out of left field to a lot of people. So let's see. So, yeah, Coleman, at this point, I don't think signs with Florida State. I think that goes in a different direction. Like I said, there's some, some small amount of optimism from some people surrounding him, but at this point, I still think that goes in a different direction. Let's see. If you don't get the high school recruit, he's going to. Yeah. And I'll be interested to talk more about Bud about this, about the impact on the portal and what it means for like the high-end 3-star prospects. And if they have to wait, it wouldn't be uncommon that, say a Florida State would have kind of soft played a outside linebacker for months and just kind of, quote, kept him warm, to use an industry term. And then, a night before signing, say sometime around now, a kid would get would get a call and get greenlit for a scholarship. And I really wonder as to if stuff like that happens in 2021 with the transfer portal. I think that scholarship for most large programs at this point just gets held and said, well, we'll see what comes out in the portal, and we'll see if we'll see if something becomes either immediately available or immediately available after spring practice, when a kid either realizes he's not where he wants to be on the depth chart, or maybe a coaching staff is talking to him about a position change or anything else like that. Yeah, Lee, I did see Lane Kiffin's commitments today and comments today, and I thought they were interesting. I mean, I thought there's a decent amount of honesty to him, and I have been a little surprised that you haven't seen kids talk more openly about, hey, look, this guy offered, this school offered me $280,000 in NIL money, and nobody else has even come after that or something like that. So kids have been kind of tight-lipped about, particular NIL offerings, and that's an interesting development. But I don't think what Lane said, while it didn't necessarily come across in a wonderful manner, I do think there's a decent amount of truth to it. And Lee, I think you're probably right that there is probably some skepticism as to how legal some of these things are and if they can comment about them. And I guess you can't really comment about it as a recruit because it would be seen as a direct enticement, which is in theory seen as illegal. The Johnson brothers. I mean, the fact that the Jake Johnson, the kid that would be the best wide receiver or be the best receiving option you have on campus the second that he stepped on campus, outside of the times that Travis Hunter took a snap on that side of the ball. Looks like he's making a commitment tomorrow. A&M is the guess that most of the people that I talk to about that, because A&M needs more kids in this recruiting class, don't they? That looks like that's the direction that may be going. Although, again, nobody has a real perfect, feel for this. I'll also say, look, I think you may see some crazy stuff tomorrow. I really do, because there's so much uncertainty out there. There's been so much change recently in these coaching staffs. I think you may see a really wild day, and that's not just Florida State specific. I talked to a guy who does in the recruiting department at another ACC school here, and talked to two guys who work with SEC schools yesterday, and it's a wild damn time in recruiting, and I think tomorrow may be one of the more wild signing days that we've seen. So just a kind of a random comment more about national recruiting in general, and not necessarily something that's Florida State specific. I mean, there are but only so many high school kids that can immediately contribute, and you're right, Phil, that the portal will serve as somewhat of a bridge for that. But at the same time, that's one of the unique selling points that Florida State can make this year, is a lot of these kids can come in and immediately contribute, because the roster is not very good. And particularly in some positions, the roster is just really just horrible. Dillingham replacement, I would fully expect Atkins to be named the offensive coordinator. Fully expect that. Wild day benefiting Miami. Yeah, no, I mean, that's not. It could, in theory, certainly, but that wasn't code for any particular school being the beneficiary of it. It's just more that there's an awful lot of staffs out there who are recruiting. Recruiting against 3 or 4 schools who don't really know where a kid's going, and neither do some of their competition. So I think tomorrow has a chance to be a very, very wild day. How do I feel about Travis Hunter? I think Florida State's going to sign Travis Hunter tomorrow. I was a little concerned again about 10 days ago or so, but I think you're good there. I do. I'm almost hesitant to say this because I fully expect Travis Hunter to sign with Florida State tomorrow, and I'm not hedging, backing off, or anything else there. But like this theory that he would be doing the worst thing possible by Florida State to doing that, I'm not sure that's the case. I mean, if a kid waits and lets the rest of the class sign with Florida State and then were to go elsewhere, that's not necessarily the worst way for that to play out for Florida State. But having said that, I think Travis Hunter signs with Florida State. I think Travis Hunter is the biggest thing that Florida State has signed in a long, long time and is going to be a massive addition. So I welcome that, and I very much look forward to transferring from the "are we sure Travis Hunter is going to sign with Florida State" discussion to arguing with each other as to what side of the ball he's going to play on and how many snaps. What concerned me with Hunter is just, look, I've been talking with Bud for 5 years about some of the, very aggressive and, a lot of innovation has been shown by the boys in Athens when it comes to getting kids to commit and see where their argument is the most influential. And, I say this in a complimentary fashion. I'm not bagging on Georgia, but Georgia knows what the hell it's doing when it comes on the recruiting trail with putting some very direct enticement in front of kids and showing them that the path to Athens is sometimes the best way to go. So Corbin going pro is something that I had mentioned on the Nolecast for about a month and a half or so that I wouldn't be shocked to see. I kind of thought that this was the direction that this was probably going to go in whenever you have a back who's suffered a significant injury and then had a nice year of a nice year that he was able to put on tape, got some of that explosiveness back that made him a very sought after recruit coming out of high school. I wish Corbin the best and love everything that he did during his time in Tallahassee, and he was a really great influence. So the question is, who's more likely to sign tomorrow, Nigelique or Jones Jr.? I think that Florida State has a chance with both, not a great chance with either. As I said at the beginning of the pod, I would be slightly more optimistic about Nigelique Kelly at this point. I do think Florida State's gotten some positive feedback on that end. Again, I question as to how many other schools have gotten similar feedback, but, that would be a massive, massive recruitment to win, just by the whole series of events and the manner that it played out, and it would be very significant. If you get either of them, it's a really big day and something to be, celebrated. Having said that, I don't think you get either of them. So, any idea how much Marvin Jones Jr. NIL money? I'm really not sure. I mean, I think Marvin, you're certainly talking six figures with these kids, and somebody like Jones Jr. would probably be closer to $200,000. But I'm not positive about that, and I'm almost hesitant to speculate about it, other than kind of rough round numbers like that. I will say that I'm really interested to see what Florida State does with their NIL program. I'll just let y'all in on a little Nolecast secret here. That I reached out to two members of this roster at the beginning of the year, and basically, look, you can't give these kids money, and I wasn't just trying to give these kids money, but I was kind of just trying to give kids some money, and never got a response from them, either of the two people that I reached out to. Now, there's it's first year doing this. There's always going to be some hiccups in the system or whatever else. But because of the way that the Florida State law is written, the school can't have direct contact with kids about this. There kind of has to be the creation of a third party. So glad to see that Rising Spear was able to get up off the ground. We'll be curious to see what happens with that. And I think it'll be a good tool. I mean, there needs to be kind of a go-between between a entity that wants to sponsor and the roster. You can't just call Odell and tell him you want to sponsor some of his kids or whatever. So Yeah, what would we have had those kids do? I don't know. To wear a Nolecast T-shirt once a month or something like that. I mean, it would have been minimal. I can promise you that. Um, yeah, now a Rising Spear, not a not a moment too late for that. So interesting to see what happens here. So Jack asked random question: how did I meet Bud? Bud and I met about I don't know 10, 12, 14 years ago, somewhere in that area. Um, I was working in radio at in Atlanta here at 680 The Fan, and we were just kind of on in a similar, very small Florida State message board, and started swapping some ideas and insider information with each other or whatever else. There was a couple series of events that led to Bud and I communicating directly a little bit more. One of them was uh, there was a Florida outlet that was trying to shop a story about Florida State's illegal recruitment of James Wilder Jr. and it was ended up being like one of the larger nothing burgers of all time. But I called Bud the night before to discuss how legitimate that was, and nothing ended up coming of the story. And he and I talked for 2 hours and 10 minutes about defensive linemen's weight gain and everything else. And I was familiar with podcast in general and thought that was going to be a thing that was going to be emerging on the scene. So I said, hey, look, why don't we start a podcast? If we're going to just, sit here and talk between 7:30 and 10 about Florida State football, we should probably record this and see where it goes. And that's kind of how the Nolecast started. Yeah, CJC, I don't, Marvin Jones Jr.'s mother is much more the driving force behind his recruitment than the father is. So that's the dynamics in that recruitment. Yeah, okay, Lee. So yeah, no, I mean, it's been some ups and downs as to what's happened all year, and Bud and I are of slightly different disposition as far as how the record played out. I will say, look, if you're 5-7 and you're losing kids, or not losing kids, but you're not signing everybody on signing day that you wanted to 2 weeks ago, you're always going to go back and look at things. And um, I my kind of personal opinion is if you're 5-7, it I don't want to say it doesn't matter how it played out. It does to an extent, but you're 5-7 is 5-7. I will say that I thought the beating Miami in the way that you did put a whole lot of more people behind Norvell and belief in him, and I think it was tied to some of the success that Florida State's had recently in some of their NIL pursuits and getting it off the ground and being able to present some things to kids that you needed to make sure that they ultimately signed with you. How does the uncertainty of Dillingham impact you? I don't think it's a big deal. I don't think it did you any favors either. I mean, ideally, this would have taken place a week from now, but that's just not the way that this coaching game works right now. And guys get opportunities, and Dillingham, as Josh Newberg and others have pointed out, Dillingham is a super aggressive guy, but particularly has relationships with Lanning, and that was always going to be something to keep an eye on. And then when Lanning ultimately gets a job like Oregon, well, there's just an awful lot of things that make sense about that. So yeah, remember the good old days of SoundCloud? Well, SoundCloud's what we're on. TalkShoe was the old OG platform that was kind of hilariously bad at times. So shout out to them. In the middle of the Satanists and thoughts on Norvell's extension. Yeah, I don't think it's a real big deal either way. I mean, it's a verbal agreement. Lets him look at any kid that he's recruiting and tell him that he'll be there through the entirety of his recruitment. It's I don't want to say it's a non-issue, but it's really not a real big deal in my opinion. I do think that I'll be a whole hell of a lot more interested in and will take away a lot more from extensions that either get offered or don't get offered of the position coaches immediately after this. So, yeah, I did hear that a lot, Oscar, that when I left Talk Shoe, my voice changed significantly. By no means, not by no means the only person who said that, so I'm guessing that was probably pretty accurate. Yeah, Hunter more plays on offense than defense. Yeah, I think he certainly will play more on offense, particularly if you have the day at wide receiver that I'm concerned about you potentially having tomorrow. What fake Twitter rumor made you laugh the hardest this cycle? I don't know. I just, Twitter in general just cracks me up, right? Like when that eyeball stuff got started yesterday. I just love that some guy's immediate extrapolation of that was like, I bet this has to do with Marvin Jones Jr., doesn't it? Sure, bud. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Travis Hunter's expected to sign tomorrow. Definitely. Gregory Stone asked a question, and kind of the reference here is from Jeff Cameron, who's done a great job of always articulating the speeding analogy or speeding metaphor of Greg asked, do you think we've reached a point where driving 155 will now be allowed/ignored? Well, yeah, I mean, it's more or less legal. You can, you can, you can do what you want with how some of these individuals choose to spend their money and whether or not they, want to either pool it together in a manner to where what I think is going to be somewhat more common moving forward, to where like every student athlete or every scholarship football player is guaranteed $39,000 a year, whatever it may be. Or, if you're at Alabama, that number will probably be closer to 60 or something like that. I do find it interesting that I do think there's been some significant NIL deals that just weren't announced or weren't made a big deal of. I referenced this like 5 or 6 months ago. I think Alabama made a massive NIL deal with a with an automobile company that was split evenly throughout the course of the roster, and you didn't really hear about it. So I think some of these schools are choosing to just do it, provide for the student athletes in a manner that they haven't ever been able to do, and then I'm sure they're using it internally as a recruiting tool, but aren't necessarily discussing it as much kind of outside the campfire. Now, at the same time, Nick Saban casually walked up to the stage at SEC Media Days and said, yeah, our quarterback's got more than $1 million NIL deal here now. So it's interesting, the deals that are talked about and maybe those that aren't. But again, we're all just kind of living through the beginning stages of this and trying to figure out, what it looks like and what it ultimately becomes. Yeah, that's a great question. Seminole Moments to ask, whatever happened to the Apex program? Haven't heard a whole lot about it since Florida State introduced it. Yeah, I mean, I think they're still figuring out how to try to marshal the resources that they have at hand and put that together in a manner that's productive. But I really, is the Apex program going to help Jordan Travis put together 4th and 14 sweatshirts or something like that? That's kind of what that would be designed to do. It's not so much a, hey, Marvin Jones, we're going to give you $250,000 a deal a year here. It's more like, hey, Marvin Jones Jr., when you sign here, we'll help you, develop your brand, market it, and put it in a manner to which can be, monetized and developed in a more, significant manner. Also, just want to tell y'all I'm like heavily just fighting a cold and have congestion here. So if you hear me, mouth breathing on the microphone or whatever else, I apologize, and we'll try to minimize it as much as possible. Yeah, I mean, student athletes will be making more than teachers, and that's just the cold reality of the situation, and probably reflective of we should get Jimbo in here to talk about how that's reflective of broader society issues and everything else. But B. Riley, I agree that is certainly the direction that we're headed here. Quarterbacks in the portal that we might go after. I don't think anybody is going to jump on a quarterback immediately. I mean, if you just look at the names that have entered in the last 10 days or so, it's really kind of wild. I did find it interesting that, like, when you enter the portal, you can deem yourself either open to contact or not. And I think almost everybody has, but the Auburn kid, which makes me think that he's got a feeling for where he's going to go, and that'll be interesting to see. Certainly, you would think that that UCF may well be that destination for him, but no. I mean, I think the portal. What you're seeing with the portal is that you really don't need to rush into anything. I mean, these situations are going to play itself out. There's going to be more and more kids that that enter this thing and try to figure out. Really, everybody's got to try to figure out how to do this and whether or not it's advantageous for them to try to immediately identify somebody, get a commitment, etc., or if it's best to just let it play out, see what actually comes about, and what their real options are. So I was watching X's and O's, or the triple option. I get that confused. I think the YouTube page is called X's and O's, and the triple option is the show. If you guys haven't given that a listen previously or a watch over on YouTube, I would recommend it. But they brought up a great point that Dylan Griffiths didn't enter the Dylan Gibbons, didn't enter the portal until May of last year. He went through spring practice, realized he wasn't where he wanted to be on the depth chart, and ultimately left. So, it's 4 or 5 months from now. There's a whole lot of transfer portal activity that has yet to take place. So I know it's cool, and I crack up as well when some people in our fan base on Twitter, like, always use that that picture of the gentleman in, like, the gold suit in the distance, eyeing up every prospect that enters the portal. That is hilarious to me. But these decisions don't have to be made instantly, and you've got a lot more time to let situations play out. Let's see. Michael asked, what was your favorite Jimbo moment? Mine was, I mean, when he compared players on the roster to debt was certainly up there. I mean, there's a lot of good Jimbo moments, both of the hilarious kind, and then he's the good kind. When he goes in there and into Cam Akers' living room and tells him, son, Ole Miss's problems aren't your burden to carry, or whatever. That's a hell of a recruiting pitch, and I'm at the point in my Jimbo phase here where I just wish him the best and enjoy and appreciate what he did during his time here at Florida State. And yeah, his ankle, I mean, his ankle response to every Matt Thomas question that was ever thrown his way is pretty hilarious as well. Does Max Johnson fit the offense perfectly? No. Would he have been a great addition, or would he really have been a good solid addition? Yes. Would he also have been the addition to which I don't think he would have scared anybody away? Yeah, I do. I think that would have been a good fit, and I would have loved to have gotten his brother. His brother would have been the best receiving option from the day he stepped foot on campus if he had chosen Florida State. So, disappointing not to see that play out, in my opinion, in Florida State's, to their benefit. But we'll find out more about that tomorrow. But as I open the podcast with the latest on the younger Johnson out of Oconee County, which is either the best tight end or the third best tight end, depending on where you look, is that he may well be going out to play with Jimbo, ironically enough. So good, because Texas A&M is in desperate need of some more talent in that recruiting class that they've put together. What do I think Florida State needs to do with the support staff in the offseason, Austin? I think they need to address the position staff, the direct staff immediately. You need to reevaluate some of your position coaches. You need to you need to get a feel for what people's strengths are, what they're really bringing to the staff, and why you have them. And if it's that you think there's some kind of great coaching commodity, then you've got to figure out where they were able to bring that. Where they were able to bring that to you, whether they are some kind of great resource when it comes to breaking down film or preparing kids or whatever else. You need to be. You need to have some real dogs on this staff when it comes to recruiting. You've got 2 or 3 guys who can really hold their water on the recruiting trail. And when you're at Florida State with this roster right now, that number's got to be closer to 5 or 6. Let's see. Do any other Florida State podcasters annoy you? Yeah, no, that's not the conversation for the evening. Is Dugan's getting extended in January? It would seem pretty doubtful at this point, but we'll have to see. Any young and upcoming coaches we should know? Yeah, no, I mean I don't know that they do love the Tokars, or there's a lot of good conversation about the Tokars guy that's on staff, and I would expect him to probably move into the quarterback position. But that is kind of the challenge for head coaches as they get further and further away from their assistant coaches' days and the period of time in their coaching development when they really had their thumb on who the great young minds were in the game and where they are and who they would like to add to a staff once they became a head coach at a significant program. That becomes, that's a harder challenge for every head coach the longer he's in that position. So it will be interesting to see how Mike handles this. I do think that if you're going to promote Randy on the defensive side of the ball, that you've got to be real aggressive with what you're trying to do and who you're trying to identify as hires on the offensive side of the ball. If you have to make changes on that side of the ball, which ultimately I think you are. Let's see. Our old friend Matt Leach asks, may have already answered this, but is there a connection between the number of DBs that they're on and so few wide receivers in the class? Wondering if they're clearing the way for Hunter to play primarily on offense. Yeah, no, I mean, I think they've, I think the conversation with Hunter has been that he will play on both sides of the ball, but they plan on developing him and seeing him drafted as a, top 10 pick on the defensive side of the ball. And that's what that kid's, ultimate want is, at least as it was expressed to me 3 or 4 months ago. But that kid's as dynamic a prospect as you've signed on whatever side of the ball he comes here in, 10 or 15 years. And Florida State's wide receiver position is in desperate need of a talent infusion. And if Travis Hunter ultimately signs with Florida State, as I expect he will tomorrow, I think that you'll see. It wouldn't shock me if his freshman year isn't as high point in the number of offensive snaps that he takes, and then maybe it trends downward a little bit over the course of his career. What happened to Dugans? He was really desired when he left Miami, not just because he was alum, but because he had some dudes under him. Yeah, it's weird. I mean, he's always had the there's always been the complaint about his wide receivers, dropping balls occasionally and stuff like that. But he was really instrumental in keeping some of Florida State's transition class together as well. So it has been a little bit of a precipitous fall off for Dugans. I would agree. And I don't, I'm not in those meeting rooms. I don't know if, if the internal desire is there in the manner that was 3 or 4 years ago to recruit or what. I'm not saying that to suggest something. I'm being dead honest with you. I don't know. What I do know is that you have not had some success on the recruiting trail with wide receivers, and that you have not developed wide receivers. I mean, it's just fact of the matter. That room is, not very good at all. And it doesn't appear, at least the night before signing day, as though there's going to be a massive injection of talent into that position group either. Yeah, I mean, I know what y'all are saying to an extent when you say like, oh, some of these kids can play both ways and stuff, but it's like that works a whole lot better in Madden or NCAA than it does in real life. I mean, there's just a kid that can play both ways as a like once in a decade type talent for the most part. It is very rare, and even more of an oddity that you don't need that kid to take snaps at defense to develop the side of the ball that you're actually signed him to, and trying to trying to better. Also, it doesn't make for real good relations between the staff when you've got a kid bouncing back and forth all the time as to what position group he's in, and not giving a certain degree of certainty as to what a coach's position group looks like and who he needs to focus on and try to develop. I'm hearing that McCall flips tomorrow. Yeah, no, not hearing that, and not. I mean, of all the guys that I have a concern with, Sam McCall is not one of them. At least at 10 o'clock the night before signing day. We'll see if that changes. Let's see how many recruiting classes wins to constitute. How many recruiting classes and how many wins to constitute? Yeah, I mean, I think Mike will need to sign another class next year of top 10 to top 15 quality to really be confident that you've put together a ground level floor to which you can think that you're really seeing like a rebuild take place. This class is significant and needed, but next year's class is just as desperately needed. And I think, if you could have beat UF, obviously would have been great for numerous reasons, but it would have, provided a level of momentum for the 2023 class that would have been really significant. So, but I still think that Florida State's in a really good position to do well in 2023, and it's just going to be fascinating to see what the landscape of recruiting in the state of Florida looks like with all the challenges or all the changes that have taken place. Who are you concerned about flipping tomorrow? No, I don't see anybody that Florida State has signed or has committed that's going to necessarily sign elsewhere. I mean, the Mortimer kid is the one that you want to take a look at. I talked about that some at the beginning of the recording. Just a little bit of a strange situation, but somebody that Florida State desperately needs to sign. I think, you're going to have a situation with the kid from Auburn there that it doesn't sound like he's going to have an NLI to sign until February because of academics. But no, I don't think there's, you may have one or two kids that don't sign, but I don't know that there's necessarily anybody that I'm, desperately concerned is currently committed, and you're gonna wake up and see him put on an unfamiliar baseball hat. Were we screwed if early signing day goes away? Yeah, that's a good question, and it'd be fascinating to see what happens with this. I mean, I know there's a lot of talk about moving signing day up earlier. There's some interesting ramifications, and to an extent, I think that should probably take place, or they should just do away with it and go back to February. But if you move it up, the date that's normally put as to what would happen would be somewhere in late August. I mean, that's going to be interesting, y'all, but but what's going to happen is you're going to have to put a stipulation in there as to if position coach or head coach is fired, then the kid can get out of that commitment with no any kind of harm done or whatever else. He can just kind of wipe his hands of the situation. Well, what that's going to do is people aren't going to fire coaches until 2 days after, I guess, after the end of the traditional signing day or something like that. It's just there's always going to be responses and creative ways that staffs try to get away around whatever structure's in place. I do think that early signing day here at this point in time is a little bit of a wonky situation, and it's not really all that different. I mean, really, all you've done is move it up 6 weeks from where it was as far as the first Wednesday in February to now you've made it, in the middle of December. It will be interesting to see what happens. My prediction is that within 3 or 4 years, this particular signing day doesn't exist anymore as it is. It's either moved to August or it's just done away with, and we go back to February as it was back in the good old days. Do you think anyone will postpone tomorrow? Not for reasons outside of academics or other things that we referenced. I mean, these kids have gone through the process. Most of them are just tired of it at this point in time. I don't think you see any kind of postponements that aren't tied to questions surrounding academics. Any thoughts on the Johnson brothers? Yeah, we talked about that. It looks like with the younger Johnson, the kid out of Oconee County, there announced that he'll be making his decision, I think, at 8:00 in the morning. In my opinion, that is not going to go in Florida State's direction, and that's disappointing. Would have been a great ad for Florida State to have kind of backed into something like that, and Jake Johnson would have been an incredible addition. One more time on Marvin Jones Jr. Yeah, and I think Florida State sits third or fourth for that kid right now. As I said at the beginning of the podcast, I think you got to hope that Marvin Jones Jr. goes to bed tonight and has dreams of his dad and his cousin and his uncle and everything else, and wakes up in the morning and says, for me it's Florida State. That's what I got. You got to have a Lorenzo Booker moment for Marvin Jones Jr. Tomorrow, or a Travis Johnson moment, or all sorts of these other long old man recruiting stories that I like to reference, where kids, were all set to go somewhere else and then sat in front of a letter of intent and just realized that Florida State was where they wanted to go and where they needed to go in their mind. And so you got to have a last minute change of heart for Jones Jr. Oh man, DeMar Dorsey. That is a name I haven't heard about in forever, and I was actually trying to remember that kid's name about a week ago or so. So thank you very much for bringing that up, Eric. I felt like Sam McCall was going to be, you're going to have to ride that out, and he was probably going to commit to 2 or 3 places as the recruitment went on. But yeah, that's been a kind of consistent, steady recruitment. Been wild to see that kid is stuck. And whenever I talk to Bud about, Florida State's best recruiters, he always cracks me up. He'll be like, oh, it's it's this guy and Atkins and Travis Hunter, and you just got to give Travis Hunter credit for that. You got to give Travis Hunter a lot of credit for a lot of the kids that are going to sign tomorrow, but no more clear example than Sam McCall. So look, if you get the Thomas kid that we expect tomorrow out of Niceville, and you get McCall and you get Hunter, you put together a hell of a secondary recruiting class. And the Thomas recruitment is interesting in the fact that 3 weeks ago, you really would have sounded crazy if you would have even insisted that Florida State might have been on his board. But you did a good job consistently pursuing him. You had some interesting relationships there that those are the things that you fall back on when you're in the in-state school and you're recruiting a kid out of Niceville. Florida State, I will give this staff credit. They explore everything in the world that they can to try to get in front of a kid and try to make an impression on a kid. And they did a good job of that with Thomas. And by all accounts, that's going to end up, ending with in a really positive manner. Look, I know that there's some frustration, or maybe not frustration, maybe just more disappointment, because you're not going to, in all likelihood, you're not going to sign Kelly. You're not going to sign Jones Jr. You're not going to sign Coleman. You're not going to sign some of these names that, have been kind of in everybody's eye for the last month or so. But look, you're going to wake up tomorrow, and you're almost certainly going to Azare Thomas, who's a top 100 player and a hell of a football player. Julian Armella, who's a top 10 offensive line prospect. And you're gonna get a kid like Tyree West out of Georgia. I mean, those are really big additions. And if maybe there was a little bit more uncertainty to some of these kids or some other things, I think the psychology of recruiting is fascinating to watch with fan bases, because it's almost like as soon as they become convinced that a kid's actually signing to them, well, they just kind of lose interest, and it's not as big of a deal, and that recruitment's not as big of a deal. So, fascinating to see how that plays out. But I think Thomas, let me pull up the 247 schedule here. So Thomas is a 1:30 decision. West is an early decision, if I remember correctly. Yeah, West is a 9 a.m. And I don't see Julian Armella on here, so we'll have to look at that. But you should, by 10 o'clock, you should have a pretty good feel as to some of these pieces, as to where they go, and the West kid is a 9 a.m. decision. So, I mean, we have to look at all of this as an honest reflection as to the program that's doing this recruitment, a program that won 3 games last year, that won 5 games this year. The recruiting class is going to be a very good class considering the circumstances. It's just not going to be exceptional. So, you take that for what it's worth. I do think Florida State has a chance to add, maybe one name that the general recruiting body is not super familiar with, but we'll see if that comes to fruition. And you can sign up on my for my yearly pass as I discuss the mystery recruit more. I'm kidding. I'm just laughing about some of the recruiting industry there. So a lot of people are asking us about like text messages. Certainly Tomahawk Nation, to my knowledge, is still doing that. That's one of my favorite things on signing days, to get all the texts from Tomahawk. I'd point you in their direction. Great people who do a great job covering the program, and I do believe that they have that you can opt in to their NSD text messages, as I have done in the past. Earl Little is the question as to when he commits. I think he's one of the later commitments of the day. Yeah, he and Marvin Jones Jr. are a 4:45 time period as currently listed on the on ESPN's list of kids that are going to commit there. How long before the portal becomes the last resort rather than the method of choice? Anomaly, how long does it take? I don't know. I mean, it's interesting to see. It's interesting to see what happens with the portal. I still think people are trying to figure out exactly how they're going to use this, and various schools are trying to figure out how much they want to lean on it. As far as who I think Florida State may be able to add that people aren't immediately familiar with, I'll certainly let you know in time. We talked about Norvell's extended contract earlier. I don't really think that's that big of a deal. I think it's a good thing, but not something I'm going to, worry about or tell you is a, brilliant move one way or another. Hold on, there was a Keir Thomas question. Versus the defensive end out of Albany. I don't think you're going to hear on that for a while. I mean, I know that USC's gotten involved. Miami's gotten involved. I think the original timeline was that kid wanted to make a decision before Christmas. I don't get great feelings for where they are right now, but that will just be interesting to see how that plays out and where he actually travels to. You certainly have a unique selling point with, what Thomas and and Jermaine were able to accomplish this year, and the ability to instantly plug in a defensive end and have him be a impactful member of your defense. But we'll just have to see where that goes. I'm not particularly optimistic about where they stand with him right now. So, all right, y'all. I mean, that's right at about an hour. I feel like we've covered almost everything. Most of the questions at this point are, repetitive or something that we talked about previously. So, probably going to wrap it up here. A final question: would you go to the portal for a running back? I think they will be very selective with a portal running back. I think they'll be patient. Like I said, you're going to see tons of names enter the portal. The portal is going to be a crazy freaking place this year. I think we'll see more portal activity this year than ever, and by a really massive amount. So I do think that they'll be open to it, but it's going to have to be a really good fit. So for me, and the Lagavulin 16 and everybody else associated with the Nolecast, certainly appreciate you signing in. We'll have, I think the plan is for Bud to do a solo show tomorrow while he is on the road, and then we'll be back maybe, Friday or sometime over the weekend to do a full recap. So, love you guys. Appreciate all the support you give Bud and myself. If you get an opportunity to subscribe to the YouTube page or whatever all that other stuff is, know that it's appreciated. And go Noles. Hopefully today, by the time you're hearing this, it'll be today, will be a great day for Florida State, and we all anxiously await that Travis Hunter LOI. Look forward to getting it, and we'll jump into more recruiting conversation and a recruiting recap later on in the week. Till then, go Noles.